Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.
The state of the U.S. budget is an important topic to Americans. Former U.S. Comptroller General David Walker has spent his career educating the public and politicians about fiscal responsibility. Elon University President Leo Lambert recently sat down with Mr. Walker to discuss the future of our deficit.
Mr. Walker, thank you so much for joining us at Elon.
It's good to be with you.
Delighted. You've used the term fiscal cancer to describe America's debt. We understand great medicine here in North Carolina. Tell us about the treatment the U.S. needs to undergo fiscally.
Well, for many years, over 200 years, the United States didn't run deficits and accumulate debt unless we were at war, a declared war, faced a recession, depression, or a national emergency. But starting in the 80s, we became addicted to conspicuous consumption, deficits, and debt. We found our way temporarily in the 90s, but now we've lost our way. And so we have to come back and recognize that nobody, including the United States of America, can spend more money than it makes, charge the credit card with abandon, without someday expecting to have a day of reckoning. So the first thing we need to do is bring back tough statutory budget controls like we had in the 90s.
What did the Simpson-Bowles Commission get right, in your view?
The Simpson-Bowles Commission got a number of things right. First, they demonstrated that our challenge is not really today's deficits and debt, although they're high and a matter of concern. It's the ones that lie ahead, that are driven by demographics, healthcare costs, and a growing gap between revenues and expenses. They also demonstrated that the gap is so great that everything has to be on the table. Entitlement reforms, defense and other spending cuts and constraint, as well as comprehensive tax reform that will generate more revenues. So I think they did a very good job. What's sad is that nothing has been done with their work by the President or to date by Congress, although that may change.
Name 4 or 5 specific actions we should take as a nation right now to get our fiscal house in order.
The first thing that we should do is recognize that right now the Congress is debating the continuing resolution. The U.S. government spends $3.8 trillion a year out the front door, forgoes about $1.1 trillion a year in deductions, exemptions, exclusions to the tax code. They're arguing over less than 1% of the budget. Right. They're arguing about the bar tab on the Titanic. So basically the first thing we have to do is reach agreement on spending levels for 2011 and 2012. And then we need to bring back tough statutory budget controls that will begin in 2013. Very importantly, specific debt as a percentage of the economy targets that if they're met, great, but if they're not met, then there will be specific spending cuts, freezes on certain mandatory program indexing and subsidies, as well as temporary tax surcharges that will come into effect, that will be transparent, that will facilitate accountability in the event that they fail to act, because we can't afford to do nothing.
What impact, in your view, will health care reform have on the deficit?
There's good news and bad news about health care reform. First, it's nice that 32 million people will be covered that weren't covered before. Secondly, a number of the insurance reforms dealing with young people being able to stay on their parents' plan until 26, pre-existing conditions, lifetime limits, those are all positive things. However, there's broad-based agreement that total health care cost as a percentage of the economy will be higher if the bill becomes fully in effect. And secondly, based on reasonable and sustainable assumptions, this bill will cost us trillions of dollars more than otherwise would have been the case. The chief actuary of Medicare estimates that it's $12 trillion more expensive than advertised.
Wow.
That's real money.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. There's some very tough issues on the table. Military spending, Social Security, Medicare. How should the President and the Congress approach those issues that seem perennially intractable?
First, the biggest deficit we have in Washington is not a budget deficit, it's a leadership deficit. We have too many people that are living for today rather than helping to create a better tomorrow. We have too many elected officials that are concerned with keeping their job rather than doing their job. And so the President needs to understand that he's the Chief Executive Officer of the United States, in addition to Commander-in-Chief, that the entity that he's responsible for, its financial condition is poor and deteriorating over time. He has to lead. At the same point in time, leaders of both political parties in Congress have to recognize that they need they have a greater duty of loyalty to the country than they do their party. They need to work to promote progress rather than partisanship. And so again, there is a path forward. Let's agree on spending for 2011-2012. Let's reimpose tough budget controls. The first entitlement program that ought to be reformed is Social Security because it's the least problem, it's the easiest to solve. The first tax reform we ought to do is for corporate taxation because it can improve our competitive posture, enhance economic growth, and generate jobs. But ultimately, we're going to have to reform entitlement programs, another round of health care, comprehensive tax reform, defense cuts and constraints, and it's going to take us a number of years to get there, but we need to get started now.
Good answer. If you were a young person just beginning a career today, how would you prepare yourself for your own financial security?
Well, young people need to understand that three things are being done to them today rather than for them. Their future is being mortgaged at record rates. Relative investments in their future are being cut because that's in discretionary spending and it's being squeezed at a time that they're going to face increasing competition in an increasingly competitive and interconnected world. So they need to be more informed and involved in this issue as citizens to be able to register, to vote, to make sure that we change course so that their future can be brighter than otherwise would be. But as an individual from a financial standpoint, they need to understand the government is overpromised. It's going to have to restructure its promises, and it's going to have to increase taxes over time. The younger you are, the better off you are financially, the more you're going to be affected. Therefore, plan, save, invest, preserve for retirement. You're probably going to have to work longer. Don't count on the government to do as much as it's doing right now. And make sure that you get a good education, because if you've got a good education, you got a positive attitude, you have a strong work ethic, you have positive moral and ethical values, in this country you have unlimited potential.
Thank you. Are you optimistic about the America your grandchildren will inherit?
I'm very concerned about the America that my grandchildren will inherit. I'm a baby boomer, and the baby boom generation is the first generation in the history of this great country that is not at the present time in leaving the country better off than when we received it. We're failing in our stewardship responsibility, and I'm doing everything I can to make sure that we change course, not for me, and not as much for my children, but for my grandchildren.
Right.
And I believe that we can. I know we must, and I hope that we will do so.
David Walker, thank you for your time and insights. It's my pleasure.
Podcasts on UNC-TV.org are made possible through the financial contributions of viewers like you, who invite you to join them in supporting UNC-TV.